Welcome to KRA's The Hub, the official podcast of KRA Corporation. And now get ready to hear workforce topics and trends you need to know on the go.
Well, welcome to KRA's The Hub podcast. This is the host, Jonathan Overall, and we are continuing a series here at KRA as we begin the new fiscal year entitled Get to Know KRA. And so we're taking the opportunity to sit down and talk with some of the corporate staff within KRA, some of the senior and executive leadership, and talking about who KRA is as a company, but also getting to know the work that they do. And today I'm joined by Patrick Boxall, the Executive Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer with KRA. Patrick, welcome to the Hub.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's great to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, I think this is one of the first times we've had a chance to sit down and talk here within the Hub, and I'm excited for our topic today around the work that you do, and specifically highlighting one of the principles at KRA and one of our core pillars, which is our partnerships. And before we dive into some of the questions, Patrick, tell us a little bit about who you are and what brought you into the workforce development industry.
A little bit about me, and I've been with the KRA Corporation since 1996. So I'm a long tenured employee with KRA Corporation. I am probably like a lot of other people, it was a serendipitous kind of alignment of different opportunities that kind of brought me into the workforce development space. I really started with KRA, supporting KRA in some work that we did in the housing and community development arena. And so I started with the company there, and then as the company evolved and took on a bigger role in first technically with workforce development, and then actually delivering services, I got an opportunity to kind of expand into that role. And I think that, one thing that has engaged me all along that route, all along that pathway, really has been a commitment on behalf of KRA to really stay at the forefront of where the industry is, and to be thinking about how to do things better and what kind of program innovations and otherwise make sense for the various customers that we serve. And really that's what's kept me engaged with KRA, and it's what keeps me engaged today. In fact, maybe especially in the current environment, we know that there are a lot of things that are changing in the environment that we operate in, and that really brings to the forefront the need for us to bring our expertise to bear and think about how do we do things differently, how do we make sure that we're having an impact, how do we adjust what our programs and delivery systems look like to make sure that we continue to be effective in that fundamental role that we have in brokering that relationship between talent and businesses, the businesses that need the talent. And so, I have the great fortune, Jonathan, back to your question, really to be in a position that allows me to do that, now, and really be front and center for the company. So it's a great job to have.
Well, you mentioned impact. And one thing about workforce development is that as an organization, whether it's a community provider or a company like KRA that's providing workforce services, the work can't be done in silos. And our topic today is about partnership. How do you define that word and what it really means to you in the work that you do, and really how it shows up in the work in the business that KRA does?
Thinking about the topic for today, I think that the term partnership in some ways is in some ways it's overused. It's very simple, very easy to throw about the banter, the label partner. But in many respects, it's underused as well. And by that, I mean, really everything that we do as an organization, everything that our team members do as they play their role in this organization. Everything revolves around connecting with other resources. And that, I got to be blunt. I mean, that's from the day-to-day conversations that we may have with a job seeker and with a business customer, thinking through how do we align their long-term goals and needs to the kind of resources that are available. All the way to what are we doing as an organization in supporting different systems around the country and aligning resources with what those systems need. I had a chance to travel outside the United States here recently, and I was struck by the fact that there are other parts of the world where there's a lot more opportunity for unilateral engagement, unilateral impact on a particular system. But in the United States, in all the communities that we operate in, we know we rely upon partnership. We don't have all the resources to bring to bear. And we know that in order to have that impact that you referenced before, we know that we need to be able to tie in and connect with other resources in the communities that we serve. And that's foundational to what we do every day. That's foundational to what we do.
Yeah, and I feel like you're hitting on something that really brings us to that focus on meaningful relationships, meaningful partnerships. And one of the mottos at KRA has been partnerships that deliver results. When we're looking at a partnership and a potential relationship with another organization, what are some of the things, if you were to unpack that would be a key part of a partnership that truly delivers results?
I guess, there are lots of ingredients there. There are lots of ingredients. One thing is, just to be clear up front, it's not just checking the box. It's not just a partnership for the sake of saying you're in a partnership. I think that, partnerships have to be, grounded on either aligned or overlapping goals and expectations. In many instances for the work that we do, that's because we're partnering with organizations that have a shared maybe a shared focus or a shared population that they serve, for example. But it could be something that is not as clearly defined, but there must be that overlap. There's got to be an overlap of expectation. And so what are you getting out of this and what are we getting out of this part of the equation? Figuring out kind of where is that alignment in terms of what you're looking to accomplish. And then it's really important that these partnerships not just sit on the shelf. They don't just sit on the shelf. We've got a signed MOU. Good, we got that squared away. Well, now we really need to put that into action. We really need to put that into action to, as you say, deliver results. And so that means measurement. So understanding what's happening. So if we were going to do this and you were going to do that, then making sure that we're capturing that information. And then these partnerships, need to be dynamic. And it may be the rare instance where there's a partnership that does not change. I think it's almost universal that a partnership should evolve over time. It should evolve. And so how's what you're doing, partner, as an organization shifted, and how can we shift the way that we're collaborating in order to continue to drive those results? So I think those are some of the ingredients that are really important. Making sure that you've got that overlapped or aligned objective, and making sure that you're measuring what's happening, and making sure that you come back and revisit what it is you're doing as a partnership and how it's being operationalized to make sure that you are accomplishing what you want to accomplish. I think one other thing I would add, ideally, these partnerships are grown over time. They're grown over time. Doesn't mean that it's absolutely necessary, but I do think that in the communities where we operate, our track record has demonstrated our capacity to come into a community and really grow those partnerships. Does not happen on day one. But we are very much equipped to build a framework and build those relationships out in ways that are really going to grow and have a strong positive impact, deliver results for the system. That's the other dimension I bring to bear.
That's good. And I know with KRA's work, not being fixed to a particular location, but KRA has projects and has had projects throughout many different states throughout the U.S. in its history. And every region is different. Every project is different. And I know that requires a level of strategic thinking and planning and alignment within those local markets. And you, Patrick, you've had in your career with KRA and your current role as well, been a part of many different alliances with partners that are very strategic because of that. What are some of the partnerships that really stand out and are highlighted to you in the work that you've done that were the most impactful?
Yeah, well, you'll have to stop me because I could go on here. I mean, just a real long list. And you're right. In some respects, every engagement demands a different set of partners, but there are lessons to be learned and to be carried across different engagements. I think one of the things, and I know this is probably picking up on a recent episode of the podcast. I think one of the things that I was proud of us really moving out on the last 4 or 5 years is to bring mental health resources into the programs that we're operating, recognizing the really important mental health dimension to the work that we're doing with job seekers has been really valuable. And we've had an opportunity in several projects to bring that additional dimension, licensed mental health provider in as part of either integrated within the work that we're doing or bringing in a partner, a community-based partner that can bring that resource to bear has been really important for us to be able to do. And it's now, I think, as we look at new opportunities or expanded opportunities and so on and so forth, it's always part of our equation to think about what could that look like. We've seen the really positive impact and positive results with the customers that we work with has been really important. I think another thing that we look to do as an organization that is outside, we rely upon our local team to really bring knowledge and insight to about the local community. At the end of the day, we are a national provider, and we are coming in and bringing a mix of national expertise as well as that local presence. And so we do lean upon local partners to really help grow and grow quickly, the trust that customers, whether they be job seekers or businesses, have in what we can do and deliver. And so on the job seeker side, for example, we've worked with public library systems in a lot of the communities where we operate, and they have proven to be really valuable, trusted front doors for our outreach and services. We operated an ARPA-funded contract in Washington, D.C., whose goal was to really grow the impact, to make connections between the participants and the local workforce and education systems. And we leaned on the DC Public Library System and some other community-based partners, by the way, that really broadened the reach of what we could accomplish in a very short concentrated period of time, and really facilitated us really making those connections with the participants. And we've done similar things in the business side of the equation, working with collaboratives of one way, shape, or form, or business associations that really can help shortcut the connection with a particular industry or what have you, to really facilitate a strong and rapid impact in that arena. So there are lots, I could run down a whole long list of specific partners, but I think thematically some of those are some of the main ways that we are using partners today.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that can be an advantage for a company like KRA to have the national footprint and to have a location in different markets around the country. But it can also be a challenge as well to overcome, to really be rooted in the communities that we're serving in, and the partnerships are a key part of that, and developing the presence, but also finding alignment with the work that we're doing to serve businesses and job seekers. You talked about some of the national partnerships as well. I'll throw a couple of out there. KRA has had a strong relationship with NADP and also NOB, the National Association of Workforce Development Professionals, and then NOB, the National Association of Workforce Boards. In your perspective, from your role, why are these relationships important? And what are some ways that they help to strengthen KRA's role as a national workforce provider?
Well, speaking of partnership, that relationship with those organizations, again, is it's a two-way street. We really value the role that those organizations play in the industry as a whole, and we want to support those efforts. We recognize the important role they play in positioning the industry and making sure the industry can take full advantage of the resources that are available, and really driving the industry forward. And so we very much support the missions of those organizations and look for ways that we can do that. From a straight KRA perspective, we recognize the really important value that those organizations play in growing the professional capacity of our organization. We're committed as an organization that our operations team are all equipped with the CWDP. We're committed to making sure that we fully access the resources that those organizations bring to bear as a means for us to grow and maintain the capacity of our team. And then ultimately, it does come back also to what I was mentioning before in terms of positioning what KRA can do and what we're able to accomplish within the context of what's happening in the industry. And in this instance, this is really, we recognize that NADP and NOB are they're trusted entities at the national level, and really they can help us growing our relationships with other organizations around the country is what they can support us in doing. We've had the great fortune to be at some way, shape, or form involved with 3 of the organizations that have received the NOB award for leading organizations around the country, the Trailblazer Award. For local workforce boards. Each of those opportunities has really been allowed us to really bring that understanding, bring that message, and really forge new relationships with new areas and so forth, which is really important for us to be able to do.
Now, you mentioned earlier that one of the keys is not just to focus on partnerships that check the box, but partnerships that truly help expand capacity, help to improve outcomes for job seekers, businesses, and local economies. when it comes to that partnership, I think it's great to start off with good intent and to have a partnership that is strategic. But what would you say are some of the characteristics of a partnership that throughout are really maybe a structure that's in place to ensure that those principles or those outcomes are being met throughout the relationship? What would you say are some of the important aspects of that relationship?
To piggyback off what I said earlier, I think there are some important ways that partnerships can be managed, including making sure that you're collecting data on what's happening as a result of the partnership, and that there is that opportunity in a structured way to revisit what's being accomplished. And what I did not say earlier, but I think is obviously the really important part of this equation is at the end of the day, looking at ways that can strengthen the results that are being accomplished at an operational level, and that may be that could be something as simple as we identified the wrong days and times for your team to be collaborating at our site. It turns out this was not a great alignment of resources in terms of when you're going to be able to serve our common customers. Or it may be something really fundamental, foundational, and this is something that we are regularly in a dialogue with the local workforce development areas that we support about, and that is what does a referral system look like? What does a referral system look like, and how do we make sure that there is accountability built into a referral system between partners, for example? That can be a lot more substantial in terms of scope and impact, and really rethinking about how our organizations collaborate. Those are, I think, some of the ingredients that have to be brought to bear. Certainly, and this is with the local workforce development area systems that we work with, and day to day internally within KRA. Again, don't rest on the partnerships you have. This is an ongoing effort. This is an ongoing effort, and we are continually thinking about what additional partnerships can we bring to bear to have a positive impact on the businesses and the job seekers that we support. And it may be way outside of what we ordinarily would think of as a natural fit, but it's something that can turn out to be really important. So that's about expanding. You're making sure that you do expand capacity, but you also are mindful that there are going to be holes. There are going to be holes that you want to continue to and continually fill. So that's really important for us to be able to do.
Well, as we come towards the end of this time, Patrick, again, I want to thank you for your insights and putting us into the driver's seat here of what it looks like to have a strategic approach to partnerships and KRA's approach in that direction. So I want to ask a question that's future leaning as we look ahead. And I think you kind of touched on this. You talked about looking at partnerships that are different, that may not have been part of our portfolio of partnerships before. But within this, the timing. We know that the allocation of workforce dollars is changing. They're restructuring of the legislation and potential cutbacks in dollars towards workforce development. What types of partnerships do you see becoming more critical in that new landscape that will help to advance KRA, but also workforce services providers when it comes to their partnerships? What type of partnerships do you see becoming more critical?
As the industry goes through changes, and I expect will continue to go through changes, those changes have been driven by what's happening in terms of federal and state policy, certainly, federal and state funding, what's happening in terms of the legislation potentially around what the legislation that funds what we do. We have not talked about, but this is really important, what's happening in terms of technology and AI and how that's changing what our job seekers need in order to be successful, and what businesses need as well, for that matter. All these changes are really define the environment that we're operating in now. And I think as we look forward, I put at the top of my list anyway right now is our partnerships with business in one way, shape, or form. And I think that fundamentally, at the end of the day, the same dynamic is going to be present, no matter how these other circumstances change what it is we do. At the end of the day, our industry is about making sure that job seekers are prepared for the kind of opportunities that businesses have, and making sure that businesses are able to strategically address their talent needs over time. And I'm a firm believer that that's going to continue to drive the equation, that what businesses need to do in order to meet their strategic talent needs. And I think that puts front and center the need for us to continue to expand and think about how do we engage with individual businesses, for that matter, as partners, not just as customers, but as partners, and how do we engage with business organizations or associations of one way, shape, or form. And that's certainly a message that, a goal that we have front and center for each of our operations teams right now.
Well, Patrick, I think our conversation came full circle today. I think one of the things you mentioned at the top was how KRA is a forward-leaning company and has always been at the forefront of change within the industry, and being resilient and adapting to that change, responding in the ways that services are provided, but also how partnerships are linked in the community. And so I want to, again, thank you for your insight today, for joining us here in the Hub, and look forward to having you back in the future. But thank you for being a part of this series on getting to know KRA.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you for listening to KRA's The Hub. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. To learn more about KRA Corporation, visit www.kra.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll be back soon with a new episode.